welcome to This Is. We were wrong.
Oh, my big brain can't handle it. The internet constantly is trying to tell us how the PS5 Pro exists as a real console. And to that I say,
Ha! The breaking news on Twitter is that the PS5 Pro is in development and will be out late 2024. However, it's going to be out after the detachable disc version, aka the Slim.
The way I understand this, if I were to give a semblance of credence to random Twitter rumors, which I do not, would be that this year, sometime middle or end of this year, we will see a PS5 Slim. And essentially just giving you the ability to get a slightly more efficient, slightly cheaper PS5. AKA like what PlayStation has done every single generation since the PlayStation 1 came out.
I'm gonna say it'd be $20 cheaper than what it used to be. I think it's gonna be $379 for the Slim.
Or you could just say $400 and for gamers. I think that's probably what Sony.
That does sound like Sony.
That's the rumor that's going to come out this year. And this new rumor is that there will be a new upgraded PS5 Pro launching end of next year. So 1 year after the Slim. Do you want to try to tell me with a straight face why this is going to happen so I can laugh and make fun of it and explain why it's not going to happen?
Money.
Damn it. Okay, that's a good point.
There's so many things that we talk about, like why this wouldn't happen, why it would happen.
Why does it need to happen?
Oh, I cannot, with a straight face, tell you that it needs to happen, but I can tell you it's gonna happen whether you like it or not. You know, the same people who went out and bought a whole bunch of PS5s, guess what? They're gonna go and buy a PS5 Pro.
Are they though? The PS5 is so new. I understand the logic that in the 2013 to 2016 timeframe, which is basically the difference between when the PS4 came out and the PS4 Slim and Pro came out. So naturally the internet goes, well, it's been 3 years. Where's my PS5 Pro, Mr. Sony?
I think by going with the PS5 Pro, they are not targeting the people who got a PS5. They are targeting the holdouts who are still sitting on a PS4.
Sure.
And when the PS5 Pro comes out, that's when we officially are going to stop seeing anything coming for PS4.
For the PS5, I completely know and believe that Sony are looking at the tens of millions of PS4 owners who have not yet upgraded to a PS5, and they go, Mama want.
Yeah.
Will not
so
happen.
You got to play the 5D chess, okay? You're over here
PlayStation 5D chess?
Got him! You're sitting here playing checkers, and I'm playing chess with a
device.
All right? So here's what happens. So they use this as the catalyst. PS5 Pro comes out. They use this as a catalyst. Hard stop. No new content coming to PlayStation. Your PlayStation 4 is now officially obsolete.
Sure.
And get on, if you want to continue being a gamer, you need to get on the current generation.
All PS4s self-destruct immediately. Got it.
They're going to have their $700 PS5 Pro.
Which it would be.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
of course
gonna be pricey.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are gonna say, I don't really care about ray tracing, and I don't want to spend $700. But you know what? This regular PS5, which is suddenly looking a lot more promising, and now they have 100 million PS4s out in the wild that need to be replaced. But the PS5 Pro is the catalyst that will get this whole thing started.
So while I'm going to state as clearly as possible for the record, I do not think there will be a PS5 Pro this generation. I do not think it will exist, period, full stop. However,
like and subscribe for when we do the Austin was wrong
I
video.
will. No, I will. Aaron, you can write a note right now. I will make a apology video if the PS5 Pro actually comes out. But if there is a PS5 Pro, I think there is an argument to be made, right? So if I put down my biased hat of don't think that this thing is ever going to exist, the PS5 Pro has to be more expensive, right? I don't think there's a scenario in which we get a $500 PS5 Pro. Much more expensive than the current PS5, I think is a complete no-brainer, just based on what they would need to do to really make this a full step up. Normally, I would say that's crazy, but guess what? Sony has 2 years of data of people paying way over retail for PS5s to know that people will and have paid $600-700 for the PS5s already, right? So there's clearly an audience of people who want the best PlayStation out there.
So they got to test the market without being the bad guys because scalpers were the bad guys.
Exactly.
And now if they come back and say, oh, you guys were willing to pay this and we're giving you a better console, suddenly Sony is the white knight.
So are you familiar with the term the halo effect? Not like Halo rings or Master Cheeks. It's something that's very common in the car industry. So take Acura, for example. Acura are the makers of a lot of semi-luxury vehicles that are generally okay, but for a time they sold the NSX, a very expensive, very high-end supercar that lost them literally probably like billions of dollars, right? Like it was an incredibly expensive undertaking. What they do is they create this sort of aspirational brand, this vehicle that is so much better. And you think about that, and then you go and you buy yourself a Chevy Cobalt or whatever nonsense is there, right? Like it's to get you in the door before you buy the regular thing. They can make a PS5 Pro at $700 to make that $400 or $500 PS5 look like a great deal.
All the console numbers, a lot of Sony ponies are like, look how many consoles they sold. None of that matters because they weren't making money on them until very recently.
And they're obviously, the larger that PS5 base is, the more games they're going to sell, the more subscriptions, the more services. Right. Now, I'm going to throw another thing. And again, I know I am basically exclusively arguing against my own opinion here. For the thought process, for the experiment, right? I'm going to go through it, right? The other reason why I could see Sony doing a PS5 Pro is to really stick it to Microsoft, right? Hear me out here for a second, right? Yeah. Remember last generation where Sony brought out the PS4 Pro? The PS4 was already better than the Xbox One. Like, just straight up, it was just better. But you know what happened? Right after that, a year later, Microsoft brought out the Xbox One X, which was more powerful, ran games at higher frame rates, etc., etc., etc. And while it did not certainly just make everyone ditch their PS4s, they made the enthusiasts realize, oh, you know what? The most powerful console is actually an Xbox, right? And while that was not by any means a be-all, end-all, that was a major reason why Xbox was starting to claw back to, some kind of semblance of their former glory. I would posit this to you, right? The PS5 and the Xbox Series X, essentially the same. There are some games that certainly will work a little bit better on one, but almost universally, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X are pretty interchangeable as far as performance, games, and whatnot. But Xbox played a little bit of a blind draw on Sony this generation by bringing out the Series S, a lower-end version. And while I'm sure that Sony probably briefly considered it, they, I don't think, can pull off a lower-end version of a console, right? Like, once you bring out the base level, you can't start bringing games out that are lower. You can bring out games that are higher.
It's also the type of games that you come to expect from Sony. Games are like some of the highest fidelity games on the market.
You can't make a Last of Us Part 3 or whatever that was downported to the PS4 Mini, right? Microsoft were smart. They did this at the very beginning. So if you're building a series game, whether it's for Series S or Series X, you've got to keep both of those in mind, right? Whereas if they brought out a PS5 Mini today that was going head-to-head with the Series S, none of the PS5 games would be able to be compatible if they had to lower the performance, right? No. What Sony can do, and my real argument for why this would be an actual possibility, they would bring out a PS5 Pro to say, hey, look, we now have the world's most powerful console. We've got, much better ray tracing. Because again, what we're looking at here is RDNA 2 based consoles, which is still a very recent sort of GPU architecture. But the main downside to it is that this is sort of the weakest kind of ray tracing limitation that you can get your hands on right now. If they go up a generation, maybe even up 2 generations, you're going to get not only more performance and more 4K and 120 hertz, etc., etc.
Yeah, we'll finally get, if they're going to RDNA
3 or 4, I would say 4. If this is next year, I would say 4 is pretty reasonable.
So are we going to start to see console ship with DisplayPort? I would say option, not the I think it'd be both DisplayPort and HDMI.
Like old school consoles had 2 outputs, digital and analog.
We don't have an HDMI standard that can keep up with what gamers would want in 8K.
That is actually one of the biggest reasons why I don't think PS5 Pro is going to happen, right? Yes, Sony could do this. It's absolutely possible, and they may have the incentive. Honestly, I can't argue that Sony aren't looking at this and think, you know what, we should probably do this, if nothing else, to have the halo effect and to have the world's most powerful console. But where I think it starts to fall apart, last generation, we had a great bit of marketing, which was 4K. Previously, the Xbox One and the PS4 really only did 1080p, and even sometimes below that. But with the PS4 Pro, they were able to not always hit 4K. They were still able to go 1440p, upscaling it to 4K. It was a very clear value proposition. But I guarantee you, PS5 Pro, even if you say, let's say it's got double the GPU performance, right? Let's just throw it out there. Say it's twice as powerful, and say it's got 4 times the ray tracing capability. You throw that at a console and you call it the PS5 Pro, you can slap an 8K badge on it all you want. You can say that if you look at those 2 consoles side by side, I will bet you that the average person is going to see a fairly small difference. Not to say, hold on, wait,
no.
I'm not saying that.
You're thinking about this too logically. When is anyone who argues about what they like actually looked at performance? They don't. They look at the box and say, the PlayStation 5 is so much better than the Xbox because it can do 8K. It's a placebo effect. So by coming out and saying, oh, this can do 8K 120 or whatever, if they put that badge on this box,
no one cares. No one cares.
No, they will care, because people who have never once bought the PlayStation 5 were arguing about how much better it is than the Xbox. And it's all because Sony advertised it as an 8K, which is why I think they're going to move forward with this. I agree with you that it's dumb and doesn't need to happen, but it's not about that. It's about being able to say, we have the most powerful console. Look at what happens if this Activision deal goes through. There is no doubt a massive shift in gaming in favor of Xbox. How can Sony compete? All right.
Hardware. They have more powerful
They have to go all in on hardware.
But here's the thing. This is like the arms race, right? Both Microsoft and Sony source their chips from AMD, right? So we're talking about AMD CPUs and GPUs. And while I'm sure AMD keeps, a little divide between church and state there, you better believe that if Sony start whipping up a brand new, PS5 Pro chip, there's gonna be a little birdie telling the Microsoft crew that that's going on, and that they're probably gonna do the same thing. Which is why I also think this is dumb. Like, if we live in a world where Sony can bring out a PS5 Pro, it's gonna help boost regular PS5 sales, is going to help increase the ray tracing and make the PS5 the world's most powerful console. Sweet, I do think that makes sense. But the problem is, as soon as Sony commit to doing this, Microsoft are going to be right there, because of course they are. They have to be competitive, which to me is just like, why bother, right?
I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I just think you're seeing this way different than everyone else in the industry sees this.
Do you think people just know that there was a PS4 Pro and that means that obviously they're just going to do a PS5 Pro because they're going to make a bunch of money? Like, you think it's just that simple?
Yes. Like, why wouldn't it be?
But last generation, we needed it. This time, we don't, right? These PS5s,
but people
Series
think
X,
they need it because of last time.
Yeah, they probably do.
But, again, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying here.
Yeah.
But, I think you're underestimating the urge of people have to say, I have the best console on the market.
Spend $750 on a PS5 that's marginally better.
Yeah, they have to go in on hardware because they have lost the software race.
But the thing is, though, they can't really win the hardware race because Microsoft will do the same thing.
How many people just, again, think that the PS5 is so much better, so much more powerful? When I say that Xbox won the software race, I don't think Xbox has better games. I think they have a better ecosystem to play games on.
Assuming the Activision deal goes forward.
Not even that. Just, again, Game Pass in general.
Sure.
The amount of indie titles that you have access to for one price. PS Plus is nowhere near that.
With these console cycles, right? They move in these huge waves, right? Again, let's think back to Xbox. I know I go back to the Xbox One a lot, but I think it's a really interesting sort of point, right? Xbox One started out as a complete goddamn disaster. But over basically the entire generation, they went from digging themselves into a massive hole to doing all the right things, bringing out better hardware, bringing out better software, bringing out, services such as Game Pass. By the end of the Xbox One generation and with the One X, they basically kind of clawed their way back up. But these things take a long time. Like, for someone who, obviously us, if you're watching this video, odds are you're an enthusiast. Odds are you are way more informed than the average gamer, right? But a lot of people just buy a console, especially console gamers. They just buy a console because they just want to play Call of Duty or whatever. They don't really think about the nuances and whatnot. And it takes years and years and years to change people's perspective, right? Most people think PlayStation's better than Xbox. Most people will buy a PlayStation instead of an Xbox. I do hear you that if there's a PS5 Pro that's out there, it's that Halo product. That is a reason for Sony to do it. My main argument is that it's just a damn arms race.
Again, it comes back to, what is the shareholder saying? We want a bump in stock prices. And what's going to happen when we announce a PS5 Pro? Stock price bump. That's why we get the same TikTok year of phones every year of just like, oh, this one's 2% better, because you have to have an announcement. I have something that I am afraid, but I do think is going to happen. I don't think there's going to be a disk drive in the PS5 Pro.
What you're proposing is that there will no longer be a PlayStation that has a disk drive built in, regardless of Slim or Pro. It'll always be that sort of detachable. I agree with that.
But I think what's going to happen is the $700 PS4 Pro, PS5 Pro, is going to be $800 if you want to have your disc collection.
That's an interesting
because
thought.
Again,
you just buy the disc drive.
If you're going all in on hardware, you look at like what Xbox has. They have their software ecosystem. You can play Xbox games on this platform, But now Sony's saying, now we have our VR hardware platform. We have our disc platform here.
You know what, Matt? I can't believe I'm about to say this. You make an incredibly persuasive argument. I still am going to stick by that I don't think PS5...
say anything. Your whole arguments were in defense of me saying that this is going to happen.
Because you're persuasive, Matt. I'm still going to stick my flag in the ground. The PS5 Pro will not exist. I will say, though, before this conversation, I was pretty unconfident. I'm a little shaky. What do you think?
The PS5 Pro
we're throwing it to the audience.
Owes me one.
We're throwing it to the audience. What do you think? Will the PS5 Pro exist? Do you think Matt is right in that Sony are going to start the next arms race and that we're all going to be spending $1,000 on consoles soon enough? Of course we are. How's that a question? More money, right? Yay, money!
Like, follow, and subscribe when we cover the PS5 mechanical keyboard.